Welcome back, everybody. Getting ready for the final set of the day here at Week 4 of the European SPL. I'm Aggro, joined by Taco. And Taco, we've got Elevate up against Eanix. Eanix control their own destiny to go to Valencia, but they need to go basically 4-0, though with Rival losing 2-0 today, that does help them.
Helps them a little bit, but to a certain extent, it's kind of just Eanix really have to still be at the top of their game and not be inconsistent in the slightest like they have been in the past. They have to really close this one out today, especially against Elevate, because next week it's NRG and they need another 2-0 there, so it's best to not try and take any chances here.
Exactly. Ready for picks and bans, game number 1 between Eanix and Elevate. As you mentioned, Eanix has energy in the final week of this summer split of the SPL, so you don't want to make sure that you have to beat whatever Rival would be doing in that final week, and I believe they play against this team, Elevate, in week number 5. But still here in week number 4, and Eanix can put themselves in a great spot if they find the 2-0 victory here today. Immediately in that first pick position, they ban away Bologna and the Fafnir. Elevate, they're looking at Faeles in Eanix's jungle, banning away Circuit, and then Soul for the mid lane Lawbster.
And I like Eanix's decision-making to take away the Bologna and the Fafnir, trying to take away some of the more aggressive stances that Elevate have been keen on, and immediately securing the Osiris for themselves.
Yeah, Ducky has been playing Osiris for quite some time. Was one of the players that was playing him when really no one else was. Very, very comfortable on that Egyptian solo laner. Sun Wukong immediately locked in by Elevate. You'd expect them to kind of hold that a little bit longer, knowing that Eanix already has their solo laner, but sometimes in that sort of position, you don't want to show your hand too much, so you just pick a safe pick like Wukong.
I think that numbers also just feels fairly comfortable on this Wukong.
Yeah.
It is incredibly safe as far as survivability is concerned, especially facing off against a lane beast like Osiris,
Sure.
but the immediate Nemesis and Terra pickups by Eanix are excellent responses.
Yeah, I like that Nemesis pick quite a bit, and BigManTingz very comfortable on that Terra. Elevate immediately going to the Ares, though. Dardez very, very comfortable on this god, likes to play it quite a bit, and has a pretty good matchup up against Terra, can pull her in because she doesn't have that CC immune ultimate.
Can pull her in, but Ares into Nemesis is
True.
not typically the standoff that you really want to go against. I know a lot of junglers who pretty much anytime they see an Ares and they're on that Nemesis, it just looks like a tasty snack.
That's true, but if Nemesis falls a little bit behind or Dardez gets big, I mean, Ares can make it difficult for Nemesis to do it. There's kind of counterplay for both sides there. Both do well against one another. Elevate bans out some Hunters, Ram and Hu Yi. Eanix, Nox, and Naja, and Elevate going for that Janus for nulisa.
I wouldn't be surprised if Elevate's game plan here is to just look for the comfort picks, because, I mean, Janus is one of the few times that we've seen this draft, or this roster, I should say, have a lot of success, and it's mostly just because of the fact that nulisa is so organized and coordinated on the Janus.
Chronos and Medusa rounded out for Eanix, two auto-attack damage dealers, and man, European mids just love, Europe in general just still loves these magical ADCs. No matter how many nerfs they take, they still go back to them time and time again. And Odin, last pick here for Elevate. So could be Wukong jungle like we saw Obey do earlier, though I imagine it's going to be Odin in the jungle and Wukong in solo.
I would prioritize Odin in the jungle simply because an Odin is going to have a much easier time as far as rotations are concerned, shutting down that Nemesis Terra a little bit early on. Plus, just so much damage in that bird bomb for the Chronos. Chronos doesn't have a whole lot of health.
True, very low HP pool, especially in the early game. Ready to go between Eanix and Elevate.
Should've
Lawbster,
known.
Yep. Lawbster going Medusa in the mid lane. Funball taking that Chronos to the duo lane.
It's one of those things where, like, as soon as you say a statement, you realize that it's EU, and it's probably going to be an ADC, magical ADC in the duo lane.
Right. You never know what you're going to get out of these guys. They've always got a different god pool than their NA counterparts. Lawbster took a lot of poke before that level 1 wave. Jermain's still lurking here, but it looks like he's just going to go back towards the red buff to join up with Dardez. Cherryo and nulisa get the better end of that clear, as you would imagine they would. With Odin, it really boosts your early clear to have this character along with you.
Nemesis can kind of struggle a little bit early on, so it makes sense for Cherryo to be piloting this Odin, and Cherryo especially because he favors these Guardian-esque type picks so much that I think it's really just funneling so well into his playstyle.
I mean, he wanted to play the Guardian role coming into Season 4, or excuse me, the summer split of Season 4. Didn't end up working out there for him on that team that he was playing in the Challenger Cup, but now back in the jungle here for Elevate. Eanix pretty much even with them across the board right now. Each team getting their own sets of buffs, no invades on either side of the map. And as they mentioned during the last set between Energy and the Poppies, dual lane meta has kind of transformed into just going to your own buffs, letting the wave clear itself. Why do you think that is right now, Taco?
People just wanted to start hitting level 2 again. That's really all that it boils down to, because even if you lose a little bit of the wave, as long as you're heading into lane at level 2, you're still relatively safe. And if the enemy dual lane doesn't opt to secure their buffs or enough farm to hit level 2 amongst that wave, then you have a very good chance of getting the first blood.
So teams should just pick Izanami, let her solo the wave by herself, and win the game for free.
Something about Izanami just... I'm not sure that's the direction you really want to go in. Probably won't be seeing a little bit of her for a while.
Remember whenever everyone was so scared about her and Apollo at the beginning of Season 4?
Well, that's because she was actually great in the crit meta. She was fantastic.
Yeah, the double Poison Star was really strong.
Yeah, and now that it's gone, and Apollo is just his own storyline. I mean, he never really gets to be considered OP, I should say, for longer than a week before everybody starts raging again, because they kind of forget that Hui on her Medusa and almost every hunter in the game is pretty solid at soloing him.
I mean, Apollo was so dominant for so long at the beginning of competitive Smite, and I think everyone just kind of gets flashbacks to Apollo being so dominant. He needs his knockup back on his ultimate, that's all I'll say. Faeles in the mid lane. Not quite level 4, and Cherryo is, but Faeles still willing to play aggressive into that matchup.
I like how Faeles wasn't deterred in the slightest there, still looking to go in, just because the thing about Odin and Janus is that they're still not going to have a whole lot of kill potential. Everything has to line up just right. Cherryo's got to hit a solid bird bomb. Nulisa probably needs to land that unstable vortex like to a T, otherwise the damage probably won't be there.
Cherryo, here he comes, trying to find that cage onto BigManTingz, but BigManTingz going to be able to get into the safety of his tower before that bird bomb animation finished there for Cherryo. Quick reaction time from BMT saves that first blood from going Elevate's way.
But yeah, like I was saying, my only concern for Elevate is that Odin really prospers in this early up until the mid-game stage. Then he's primarily just the ult bot. But if you're not having the follow-up damage immediately for his ultimate, then the idea behind it kind of just falls off.
That's true. I mean, usually you're used to seeing the Vulcan ult, the Zeus ult, things like that. Even things like Kukulkan that can cover a big portion of that ultimate are good enough to follow up off Odin Cage. Elevate doesn't really have that. Their best AoE damage ability is the Wild Hunt out of Jermain. I mean, that's really about it. Unstable Vortex is still one of those abilities that can be tricky to hit, even with someone in a confined space like an Odin Cage.
I mean, I don't even think that BigManTingz is too concerned either, because he was more worried about the Ares than the Odin, opting to pick up the Purification Beads as opposed to a Phantom early on.
That's true. Yeah, 4 sets of Purification Beads for Eanix. Really trying to make sure that Dardez doesn't run the game quite as well as Emilzy did earlier on today on the Ares in Obey's set. Ducky under a little bit of pressure on this right-hand side, but he's trying to return a little bit himself. Speed buff was invaded by Eanix successfully. Cherryo wasn't there on time. Cherryo still hasn't backed quite yet. Playing a little bit greedy for those Warrior Tabi finish pretty early on. Fails in a lot of trouble though, but Cherryo misses the bird bomb, was more worried about going for the blue buff. Now there comes the ultimate onto Cherryo. Ducky gonna be able to walk right through that Odin Cage, and that's gonna do it for Cherry. Didn't even use his Bracer of Undoing, and it's because of the anti-heal coming out of Ducky's ultimate. Bracer gets affected by anti-heal, Taco. Bracer's not going to do you any good once you get hit by Osiris ult.
Not in the slightest, and that was an excellently timed ultimate from Ducky. And as soon as he recognized that he had enough damage to secure the kill onto Cherryo, just dives the T2 tower, no hesitation, and that's what you need to do every single time if you want to shut down this Odin early.
The 2 new members of Eanix, new for the summer split, working together there to combine for the first blood for Eanix. Also got to give shout-outs to the Terra ultimate, giving Ducky that speed to get through the Odin ring and get to Cherryo, close that gap.
Imagine a Terra ultimate could count as assist.
You know, Jeff Hinlow once complained about that.
Really?
To me and Hindu Man on our podcast, and
that'd be a little bit too intense, I think.
And this was when Terra was at her height still too, and we were like, really, Jeff? You're gonna sit here and you're gonna ask for Terra buffs right now? Really?
It's weird though, because he's Canadian. They don't normally complain.
That's true. Oh, have you met Jeff Hinlow?
He's probably gonna get me later for calling him Canadian.
Yeah, he is. He's the nicest angry man I've ever met in my life. He really is. Eanix sitting up 1 kill right now. First blood went their way on the right side of the map. If you're just joining us, Eanix needs to find this 2-0 victory to put themselves in a decent position to qualify for DreamHack Valencia. They could lose this set 2-0 and still be alive, but it would require them to do better than whatever rival would do. But Eanix would be playing energy in their final week. So if they can win this one, either way they control their own destiny, Taco. But as we've talked about, this would really set them up for a much easier path to Spain.
I just can't get over the fact of how much of a final boss destination they actually have. Like, that's literally the Bowser in the castle for them.
Energy waiting for them in week number 5. 3-man grouping in the mid lane here from Elevate. Faeles thinking about wrapping around the backside, especially with Funball here to support. There's a slice and dice, but the Petrify from Lawbster just a little bit too far away. Now Faeles is locked in that cage. Cherryo gonna heal up from that Bracer of Undoing, and Dardez finds his own ultimate. No pulls in, but Ducky is here with that Lord of the Afterlife. Not enough damage to follow up from it though, and Dardez gonna be able to escape courtesy of Nulisa's through space and time. That was exactly what you were worried about, Taco. That was a good cage from Cherryo, and it was Faeles locked in there, but not a lot of follow-up damage.
I think Eanix just got incredibly lucky in that engagement, though, at the fact that Elevate are lacking so much early game damage, because I think any other burst combination that they would have had alongside of that Odin cage, Faeles is guaranteed dead every single time, especially with the Petrify from Lawbster being just off the mark.
It was very close there, but no team lost a member somehow in that mid lane despite an early 5-on-5 grouping. Speed buff did go Cherryo's way this time around, to be able to secure his own buff on that right-hand side. No numbers, teleporting back into the lane, now has an opportunity to go and pick up his own blue. Only buff still standing on the map for the time being. And these two team compositions, you mentioned that you're looking at Cherryo to really have success in the early to mid stages, but Eanix's composition is just filthy come late game. I mean, you've got a Hunter, you've got Nemesis, and you've got Chronos.
Yeah, Chronos is basically that hybrid. If he wants to be a Hunter, he can be a Hunter, or Funballer can take up that magical damage road that Eanix could potentially be lacking. And Funballer, being as skilled as he is, he can really opt for either direction.
Could go for that mage sort of burst damage with the abilities route, or focus a little bit more on the auto attack items such as Demonic Grip, Telkine's Ring. Even a Faeles. I think Faeles is one of those items that used to be built in a Chronos kit, and you know, a lot of people still upset that it isn't there. But when you think about it, building Faeles is just putting a lot more damage into Chronos' kit now than he had before because of that extra penetration that it gives you.
I do think it's interesting, though, that Funballer is playing the Chronos in a matchup against Jermain. These are two very aggressive ADC players, and so for Funballer to have to kind of tone it back a little bit, really just look for the farming route rather than the typical, let me try and outpoke you like route, that can be a little annoying as an ADC when you just love getting in somebody's face.
Are you surprised to see Jermain go for Ichabod here instead of the Silver Branch bow, the magical equivalent? I'll ask you that in a moment as Funball is caught out here in his own jungle. Meanwhile, Lawbster found Nulisa in that mid lane. The cage come down, and immediately Funball uses that rewind. Can't decide on the target. It's going to be Cherryo. Petrify comes through. That time, it's going to hit. Good bracer, though, from Cherryo. Boosts his health back up, and Dardez has arrived. Good damage coming out of the change. Cherryo gets up and over that wall, but fails, waiting for him on the other side. The auto attack cancel with the shield is good, and Eanix puts number 3 on the board, putting down Cherryo for the second time.
The downside of Odin, kind of just nowhere left to go, and Funballer, the patience that he had on that Chronos ultimate, beautifully timed all around, still coming out full health and able to re-engage off of it.
You know why everyone's starting to play Chronos now? They realize he has a Bracer of Undoing as his ult. Like, wow, everyone thinks his relic is so good.
Secondary bracer.
2 Bracer Chronos. And then you play him with Khepri.
Just stop.
5 lives.
Stop.
Can't kill him. Dardez going to take a decent amount of poke, but doesn't even need Nulisa's retreat portal. Going to put some damage back onto Funball. Dardez has not been able to have that big impact early on this Ares, in large part due to the 4 purification beads picked here by Eanix. And not only that, but Lawbster and Funball both having those CC immune ultimates. Ducky as well. We saw Emilzy play his Ares earlier into a composition that had very few CC immune ultimates. Eanix has a little bit more counterplay to that Ares ult.
And really, it's only Faeles who has to stay super wary about these Ares ultimates, because I think that Big Man has already started to reach a stage where he's tanky enough to kind of survive whatever might come to him if he gets pulled out of position.
And that Mark of the Vanguard's going to pay big dividends up against the Ares. All of Ares damage dot-based, so Mark of the Vanguard going to reduce all of those damage sources by 4 each time. That's going to help him feel a lot tankier than he actually may be. Ducky feels pretty tanky still, but not tanky enough to hold his ultimate in that scenario with 3 members there and only BigManTingz coming to support. Ducky takes a safe option and ults away.
Just barely getting clipped by that unstable vortex, I believe, but still not a whole lot of damage just yet onto the young solo laner, and opting for the mystical mail as well. But you were asking me about Jermain opting for the Ickful as opposed to the silver branch bow, and personally I think that this is the better direction to go for this game, simply because he's a lot more concerned about the physical gods that are on Eanix, because you're gonna have the Osiris, you're gonna have the Medusa and the Nemesis. These are all, or primarily the Nemesis and the Osiris, those are guys that just want to press W at you and not let up anytime soon. So if he has that Ickful, it's going to provide him a little bit more boxing potential and some kite ability, as well as just general damage to these guys if they keep trying to just stay on top of him.
But don't you think that makes him lose his solo potential against Funball in lane? You mentioned that, you know, Jermain's a guy who likes to play aggressive. If you go Silver Branch, I think you've got a much higher chance of finding that one-on-one kill in lane.
You won't get the same kind of passive proc off of the Ickful, obviously because you're playing off against a magical god, but it's still enough damage and attack speed to where you'll honestly be fine for the most part. You don't really notice much of a difference.
Fair enough. Warlock Sash is the call for Funball, though, on the other side, and really focusing on that late game, not worried about the early stages, especially with how good of a start Eanix has gotten off to. Jermain takes a little bit of poke, and it's enough to force the ultimate out of nulisa, trying to get there to support their hunter in time. Elevate do just that, but the chase was really over. Ducky forces out No Number's ultimate on the right-hand side as well, so 2 ultimates for none on the side of Eanix.
This has been an incredibly rough laning stage for No Numbers, especially because he opted for the Gladiator Shield. Meanwhile, Ducky's got that mystical mail, so while he's wailing on him, he's also taking damage, like just tick damage over time.
And he's gone for this Gladiator Shield and what's going to be a Hide of the Urchin, and Hide of the Urchin's a great protection item, but that's going to be 3 items in a row where No Numbers gets 0 health. And against Nemesis, your protections don't really matter that much. Health usually a little bit better up against Nem, and if Faeles recognizes that, that could be an easy kill opportunity on the right side.
I'd imagine that Faeles is kind of just trying to bide his ultimate and really wait for the counter-engage potentials, because if he's using his ultimate whenever Cherryo's trying to drop that Odin cage on him, or whenever Dardez is trying to pop his chains and pull everybody in, then it provides an easy all-in burst possibility onto either of those 2 gods. So that's probably why we don't really see him hanging around the Sun Wukong's lane too much.
It's what Nemesis does best, just bursts tanky targets, or really any target whatsoever. Nemesis can really do it all out of that jungle. That's why we see her getting a slight adjustment coming up right before the DreamHack patch, and Faeles playing her very well thus far, sitting at level 13. He's 1-0 and 2, been a part of each of the kills so far for Eanix, and this has been an interesting summer split for this team, Taco. This is a team that started off really, really hot to start the split. I believe they split down the middle with Obey towards the very beginning, and everyone was saying, man, this team's legit. Obey looked dominant during the spring split, and Eanix with these roster changes came in and took a split with them, but has had a couple rough games since then.
Well, I think a portion of that, meanwhile, all I thought it was going to be Eanix actually just bursting down this portal demon. That was insane. But back to what I was saying is that in Anorex's interview that we had with him earlier today, he even stated, I think we came into the spring split a little bit too confident. Like after the spring split, we came in too confident to the summer split. He doesn't think that they've been playing to their fullest potential like they have been. And I think Eanix kind of fell victim to that amped up Obey. And that's kind of where that public perception came in, that this team is OP. These guys are insane. This roster is just going to farm everybody. And realistically, I think it's still an incredibly strong roster.
Cherryo in a lot of trouble. He's just able to get out of danger there. The jump animation started, and whenever Odin gets stunned in that middle of the jump animation, looks a little wonky at times, but the jump gets off there for Cherryo just in time.
It's like that for any gods with jumps. If they are getting stunned, they will just land wherever they were originally going to be.
Now nulisa forced a portal back towards her own tower. Cherryo again creating that frontline zone, and you were worried about how much Elevate would get out of this Odin in the early game. Well, we're 16 minutes in, Taco, and Jerry's got about 2,000 player damage, and that's not saying, you know, he's not doing a good job. That's about standard for the pack right now. No one's doing player damage early on.
Other than Ducky. But
other than Ducky.
He's Osiris, so that kind of just doesn't count.
He's cheating.
It's not allowed to count, yeah. It's not allowed to count when you're playing Osiris.
Gold Fury pulled to about half HP, then Elevate let it go. Not a lot of burst secure on their side. All right, so Taco, let's talk about this. Janus. Can we buff this character yet?
No.
Please?
No, he's not. Janus just is not allowed to be buffed. It is okay for some gods to not be super crazy good in metas at all times.
But he is good, right? I mean, he's still got the through space and time. He's got the unstable vortex. Does plenty of burst damage in the late game. What is the reason that Janus has fallen off from being the most insane god in the game?
Janus doesn't give you that all-in potential that you want early on because this meta is so based around, like, your first 3 levels are incredibly important, especially at the competitive level. So when you have a god such as Janus that doesn't exactly provide you a whole lot of fighting potential, levels 1 through 3, it kind of makes things a little bit more awkward, especially in comparison to some of the mids that we tend to see favored right now. So I love Janus. I think that the god definitely has its own niche. It's just that right now it isn't the time period for Janus, and I'm not very upset about that because there is nothing fun about a game going to the 30-minute mark and you're trying to have a solid, well thought out, coordinated team fight, and then the next thing you know, you just get hit for 1.7k damage and you don't hear it coming.
What do you mean? I have plenty of fun doing that to people. That's one of the most fun things that I do.
That god.
Yeah, I know, and it's awesome. He's so much fun to play.
Terrible.
All right, well then, if we can't buff Janus, can we buff Zeus yet? Yes, thank you.
No.
Taco shook her head. Yes, you guys just can't see it. Take my word for it. Jermain dinging level 17 on the left-hand side. He's finished off that shifter shield, so as you mentioned, a little bit more worried about Faeles and Ducky getting on top of him than Funball in the lane. The shifter shield obviously providing quite a bit of power, but that defense as well. And after Nemesis ult, you're basically in that defense threshold right away.
And that's kind of a downside to Jermain picking up the shifter shield, actually, because you typically opt for this item if you can maintain 50% health or higher, because that's what gives you the initial power boost. But if you're constantly being pressured out to below 50% health, then you just have no damage.
That's true, and doesn't have any damage built in outside of that shifter shield, basically. Ichabod, of course, providing some, along with some penetration after some auto attacks, but not that initial burst damage from the Bramble Blast or anything like that. Needs to hit those auto attacks first. So keep an eye on how much damage Jermain is going to be able to do in the middle of these team fights. And Elevate really needs to have him do that damage with the way their draft has kind of gone the way this game. I mean, we talked about it earlier on. Not a lot of burst across this team, at least until, 28 minutes, about 10 minutes from now is when nulisa will start to really bring that burst damage.
And I think that for it to be that time when nulisa is starting to spike up in her damage, it's kind of awkward considering that you have an Ares and an Odin on your team.
It's
because
true.
That's not when you don't want to wait until the 20-minute mark to start being Ares.
Well, it's 20 minutes and Elevate's waited so far. No more waiting for BigManTingz. He stuns out Dardez. Cherryo locks Lawbster in the cage, but it's just those two dueling it out. Lawbster realizes he can just turn and fight Cherryo and be okay with it. There's BigManTingz's ultimate, giving that extra movement speed to all of Eanix to make sure that they can chase down any stragglers. Can't chase down anyone with through space and time on the map, however. nulisa has used that ultimate exclusively as an escape route so far in this game.
And that's kind of what you have to do right now up until Janus is really online. You're just kind of forced to play the more defensive role and bail your team out of these awkward scenarios. But now without that ultimate being online, that's an immediately go-ahead for the Gold Fury for Eanix.
Cherryo going to meet up with Ducky in that mid lane. Gold Fury was flirted with, and there's the ultimate onto Dardez from Faeles, but immediately that Winged Blade getting Dardez out of danger. Certainly a good pickup there for Elevate's support. So Eanix again, once more, resetting.
But the Wing Blade passive will be down for just a little bit longer, so all Faeles has to do is keep wrapping around this backside and looking for Dardez, who's waiting unexpectedly.
He's waiting for him exactly as you called it. There's the slicing dice onto Dardez and immediately fails, chasing him down and cleans him up. Cherryo's gonna fall before he can get his Bracer of Undoing off. Funball claims his first life of the game. Decent unstable vortex there from nulisa, excuse me, as everyone from Eanix was all grouped up, but already 2 dead on the side of Elevate. And it's Eanix looking for this Gold Fury, falling very low. nulisa throws out a pot shot with the Unstable Vortex, but Eanix can't seem to decide if they want to take this fight or take the gold.
And there's the ultimate from nulisa, but it's just a little bit too soon. Eanix stay pulling it, and it is going to go the way of Eanix, and now Ducky's just trying to chase down Jermain in that backside.
Jermain just able to juke out the abilities from Funball. That portal just off the mark from nulisa as well. Somehow Jermain survives in the middle of all of that chaos. Eanix secure the first big objective of the game. Their second 2 kills, that brings them up to 5 in total, up about 5,000 gold right now.
I was kind of waiting for Lawbster to die and then for Eanix to get like a double or triple kill off of it.
Yeah, I mean, that looked like what was going to happen. It was just a clear bait into that Gold Fury pit, but with everyone on Eanix being very low, does mean that No Numbers had an opportunity to invade speed, but can't quite get it done in time. I think you can say the same about this Portal Demon for Elevate. Decent idea, but again, just a lack of damage across this team.
And it's just really unfortunate because you can tell the concept behind the draft is a very good one. It's just hard to translate into the actual game.
That's one of the problems I think Elevate has had for quite some time. As a team that's always been right on the cusp of being really, really good. They look really, really good at times, and then other times they just seem to stumble a little bit. And I think picks and bans is one of those things that you can consistently go back to with this team and say, the idea is there, but it'll work on paper, but in practice, you look across this roster and you could just tell very quickly that the damage just isn't going to be there.
And Funballer making quick work of that tower. Another unfortunate aspect is, sure, the Janus has a little bit of time to come online as the game goes on later, but so does that Chronos.
And nulisa's fallen behind in terms of XP pretty heavily, 3 levels down to Lawbster right now. As you mentioned, Funball had quite a bit of ramp-up time in this one. Basically fully stacked on that Warlock Sash, and while Warlock Sash is not seen very often because of how long it takes to get there, Funball's there now. Through space of time, hits Faeles as he's locked in that cage in the mid lane. Dardez with the Blink Ultimate's gonna pull 2. No, pull 0 actually, and a big Petrify coming out of Lawbster is gonna lock No Numbers in place for the time being. Not long enough to find the kill as Ducky is chasing down Cherryo. Funball's gonna be the one to clean it up though. No Numbers comes crashing down in the mid lane. Lawbster trying to find him. Well-timed Aegis from Lawbster baits No Numbers in. Lob survives, No Numbers does not. Another 2 kills go Eanix's way. And Elevate still looking for their first.
And they just don't have the secure. There are so many members on the side of Eanix that get poked out and into those potential kill thresholds. They just can't finish it off quite yet. Ducky, yet again, wrapping around to this backside. It's Dardez who's in trouble, though. He's got Funballer chasing after him. Jermain trying to gas pedal them down, or at least keep them off his support. It is going to work out for right now, but I'm not sure how much longer Elevate can keep trying to take up these engagements.
Odysseus Bow coming up big there for Jermain, spreading out that damage. Very much like Chain Lightning. Very close in terms of looks as well. You want to be fighting against people like that in that tight corridor. Faeles wants to be fighting Jermain. He has to use his Aegis after the Nemesis ult. Still not going to be enough though. Faeles puts him in the ground. Number 4 can't find Jermain anymore. Number 8 in total for Eanix, and they get the Portal Demon as well. This has been very clean from Eanix, and I think this is a team that has been that has fallen into games that are kind of back and forth, all over the place. This is not one of those games, Taco. Very, very clean game from Eanix.
Ducky having so much solo lane pressure just permitted Faeles to run rampant everywhere else on the map. That's like the ideal scenario for the jungler when they don't have to worry about hanging out in that solo lane. Sure, solo lane's also a really easy opportunity for a jungler to get ahead, but at the expense of potentially losing Gold Furies or even just your teammates in the mid and dual lane sides. It's always great to be able to prioritize and take advantage of the Odin pick.
Cherryo is in the wrong spot on the map. Through space and time, a good idea, but would have brought Cherryo back into the clutches of Eanix. The cage is enough to get Cherryo out all on his own. No ultimates used though from Eanix. Cherryo had to use that cage, and the through space and time from nulisa as well was expended. So Eanix now using this opportunity with the ultimate advantage to push down this mid lane. Jermain stunned out, has the purification beads, and now uses them as Faeles. Continues to push deep into the enemy backline. Good ultimate from Dardez, gonna pull Faeles back in, but still not enough to find Elevate their first kill. Jermain gonna fall 9 now for Eanix, as they already found that tier 2 tower in the mid lane. Every time you think, okay, this is where Elevate's gonna get a kill, Eanix somehow are able to escape.
I thought that was guaranteed. Faeles used his purification beads so early, and he still gets out for free. And now Dardez is actually in a lot of trouble. Funballer forced into his ultimate, trying to back off, while No Numbers is trying to just smork down Lawbster. Forced into the egg is actually super concerned he was going to die there. Yeah,
trying to get away from that Jingu Bang. BigManTingz finds No Numbers, now Faeles, and Lawbster still very low, but Cherryo has to jump away because Ducky is chasing him down. Still gonna get stunned out by that Judgment Tether, but no Spirit Flail available for Ducky means that Cherryo gonna be able to escape. But Eanix now at double digits in kills. Elevate, still an egg, 0.
Nearly a 10k gold lead. Like that hurts, especially against the draft that Elevate is trying to execute. I really don't see a way for them to fight back into this game.
It's been tough thus far, almost 27 minutes in, and this is kind of the way that the European meta has gone as of late, Taco. It's not very early game focused overall. Look at Eanix's draft. Nothing about this draft except for Osiris screams early game to me. And then they play the early game very patient, very quietly. Elevate, their draft is much more early game focused and just wasn't able to make a splash.
Well, Medusa is still fairly strong as far as early game competitions are concerned, but it's nothing compared to the clear of an Odin. Gold Fury just being absolutely shredded by pretty much a double Hunter and a Nemesis. That's kind of just what you expect. The other concern here that I have for Elevate is the damage that they are meant to rely on. It's coming from Jermain. It's supposed to be coming from nulisa as well, but Jermain's build doesn't really scream damage to me.
No, plenty of attack speed. He's got plenty of attack speed there. He's got the 2 bows, the Odysseus and the Ichabod, and then the Faeles as well. But you're right, Odysseus bow really needs a lot of power to be effective, and the only real power that Jermain has in that build is the Shifter Shield. He's top of his team in terms of player damage and pretty close to Ducky in terms of overall top damage in the game, but I agree with you. I think that this build is just a little bit too attack speed focused and not enough power.
He's trying to rely a little bit too heavily on that Kern passive, where if you bring them into melee range, you get the additional attack damage as well as just his summer stance in his 1. But I think he would have just been better off holding off on buying the Faeles and just waiting for a chin size.
Jermain now has to try and defend against Eanix on this Fire Giant. I don't think anyone's going to be able to do so, and they will not. Fire Giant goes down for Eanix. Cherryo split pushing on the left-hand side. nulisa shot off a cheeky little through space and time, trying to seal that objective away, I think, but couldn't do it quite in time. And now Eanix deciding they want to siege this up. Cherryo has decided he doesn't want to team fight anymore. He wants to just push and get some much-needed farm, though. At this stage, I don't know how much items or levels is really going to help Odin become relevant.
It's not even that. Ducky backing just in case, really not permitting Elevate to get even the slightest bit of relevant gold, because it would at least help them hold out in their defenses, but they can't even do that. I mean, Eanix have just completely shut down this draft from Elevate.
Right side Phoenix is the focus here for Eanix. Phoenix and Eanix, very close. They've got some decent. They've got a really good tower siege composition. Look how much Funball did to that Phoenix very, very quickly. Down comes the cage from Cherryo, but immediately met with a Petrify from Lawbster. No Numbers once more into the back line, trying to make life difficult for Lawbster, while Ducky chases down Cherryo. Can't quite finish him off for the time being, but Faeles can onto No Numbers. Ducky gets portaled away by nulisa. Great job there by Elevate's mid laner to save the life of her jungler, but cannot save the life of her right side Phoenix. That's gonna fall to the hand of Eanix, and now they change their minds and head towards mid. BigManTingz still very healthy, tagging this up. There's the blanket from Cherryo, gets the slow, and a big ultimate out of Jermain as well, but again, just not enough damage to punish Eanix. Lawbster still completely full HP, putting some pot shots into Jermain. BigManTingz still healthy enough to tank up the remaining shots of that Phoenix, and Funball and squad come away with both Phoenixes down.
I think that Elevate just got incredibly lucky that Eanix still haven't taken even the T1 tower in the dual lane. Otherwise, I think we would have seen Eanix trying to pressure a little bit more inside that Titan room area for Elevate, just because they can.
They really can. I mean, no one's doing any damage to Eanix right now. Jermain now up on top in terms of the player damage, pretty high up there, 21,000 in total. That Odysseus bow really coming up big because of how grouped up Eanix has been in these team fights. Even if we don't like the build, it's certainly working out for the Elevate Hunter. But at the end of the day, I mean, look at where everyone else is. Cherryo, bottom of the player damage charts in the game, and that's just the pick more than anything else in my mind. He's
getting the damage from the Odie bow spreading, but it's not like it's really relevant actual damage. It's kind of like solo laners at the start of a game where they're just slapboxing each other for like 8, 9k damage that doesn't really ever actually count. And it's just unfortunate because with this, he just doesn't have any burst, and that's kind of what you need if you're going for the Odin combination.
No shred, you know, there's no chin size to make you rack up damage very, very quickly. There's no crit either. I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, there's just not a lot of burst damage coming out of the mid lane, 0 out of the jungle. We've harped on it quite a bit, but for me, that's what this game really comes down to, is Elevate needed to win this game whenever their damage was relevant in the early game. They did not. Eanix's draft come late game would be disgusting, even if Elevate had great late game, but they don't, and that's why you see Eanix just be able to really steamroll Elevate now.
And it's kind of surprising because when you think about it, the Odin pick is actually great here. I mean, nobody on the side of Eanix other than Ducky has an actual escape, and maybe Funballer if he times it right. But no one had an escape for that Odin ring, and so the concept, again, was just awesome. It's just really, Odin just does not pair that well with a Janus, and when you already have the Janus locked in, it's better to just look for something that pairs alongside of that.
That's the thing, it's, you know, we had the Janus, and then it's, oh, you know what would be good here? Odin, without really thinking about the synergies within your own team, I think was the problem there. Dardez gets stunned out by Funball, and quite a bit of damage onto him. Not as much as on no numbers. He's back in the fountain already. Nulisa chased down by Ducky. She's forced to through space of time away. And all of this in the name of creating space. Eanix knocked down the final Phoenix and now back up as the Fire Giant has fallen off of them. Just going to wait around for the next 50 seconds until FG respawns.
Spend whatever gold they might want to, and then like you said, that Fire Giant's going to be spawning pretty quickly here for Eanix. So I don't see Elevate really having any chance to contest this one. And really, things are just looking pretty grim all around because kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If they don't defend the FG, then Eanix can just super easily pressure into the Titan room. If they do defend the Fire Giant, then they're just going to end up potentially wiping and then losing from that anyway.
I mean, they might not even need to wipe to lose because of how many fire minions would be pouring into the base, though. Thus far, Elevate does have done a good job of pushing up these waves. Really, that one on the left is the closest to the Phoenix for now, and so they've got some time. You can push out these waves pretty far and give yourself a 45 to a minute window to defend a Fire Giant. But I don't know. I mean, you're right. I think that Elevate's just stuck between a rock and a hard place right now. They can't win a fight even with help of their Titan right now, potentially.
I don't know, that Titan is pretty OP. If Eanix were to completely ignore the Titan and no fire creeps were inside of the base, I think they'd have a solid shot.
Sure, but that's pretty dependent on Eanix making a pretty gross misstep.
Well, they're going to have 2 Phoenixes coming back up for Elevate.
For now, but immediately Eanix going right for that right side Firebird. Lawbster pushing up this wave in mid as well because I don't think he's even needed. Cherryo can, or excuse me, Funball can literally just one-shot this mid Phoenix at this stage. That's one auto attack from the late game. Fire Giant buffed Chronos, no numbers, immediately focused down by Eanix. No numbers has not been able to do a good job of getting into the back line because of how good the focus has been from the veteran Eanix. Immediately, every time Lawbster's under pressure, all of Eanix turns to help. Mid Phoenix already fell, right side Phoenix gone as well. No numbers, barely able to get up into the somersault cloud. With 1 HP almost, he's gonna have to retreat to the Titan room. Right side Phoenix about halfway up in terms of respawns, but I think Eanix is just waiting for as many minions as possible to help debuff the Titan.
And not having Numbers' ultimate available to him is going to make things incredibly rough for Elevate to try and hold off this siege. They're really relying on that amount of frontline potential that Numbers could provide, but he's not really frontlining a whole lot against this comp.
How do you frontline against a full build Chronos or a full build Nemesis? You know, it's hard enough frontlining against a full build Medusa. good luck up against those two on top of that. Eanix playing this one pretty slow. Faeles gonna meet up with no numbers on that right-hand side, and again, it's just Eanix waiting for the fire creeps as long as possible. Medusa can't even clear them all by herself at this stage of the game. Does have that round up to Hootie online though, so look for the one-shot potential, but one-shot potential out of Dardez. He's immediately very low, and Faeles is gonna claim the doesn't kill for Eanix. Elevate still looking for their first. Titan already down to about 50% HP. Funballer and Lawbster forced off of the objective, but no one can stop the other two members from Eanix. A clean 12-0, 35 minutes. Eanix find game number 1 over Elevate.
Not a whole lot of kills, but still a decent bit of action just because the engagements that Eanix kept forcing onto Elevate. Or I shouldn't say Eanix was forcing, it was really just their counter engages that were superb. Cherryo was looking for the rings. He had a couple of really strong Odin cages early on, just unable to really make anything happen. And then shortly afterwards, we would just see Faeles blowing him up.
Yeah, Faeles had a great game on this Nemesis. I mean, we talked about how good this pick was in general. One of the best junglers in the game right now, and against a composition like that, well, it's going to shine just about every time. This was the engagement that really got Eanix's ball rolling.
I think that Dardez was so focused on the fight and looking for that potential chain to go all in, he kind of just forgot that there might be somebody coming around his backside. And so it was excellent map awareness by Faeles to wrap around that. And I would have to agree. I think it was that particular engagement that really snowballed things out of control for Elevate.
Eanix just never let off the gas pedal there. Once they let it on, I mean, Elevate, we talked about it quite a bit. I think that they just got to go back to the drawing board with picks and bans. Maybe